They said the canyon was a death trap. No aircraft survived it, no pilot dared to return. Yet as the SEAL's last radio call faded into static, a sound began to rise over the desert. Low, metallic, familiar. Every man on the ground froze because they knew that roar. The Warthog was coming back. You're watching the Storyscape. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. The transmission had died hours ago, cut off mid-sentence somewhere inside the canyon, known to every pilot as the Cut. The SEAL team, Indigo 5, had been sent in for a target extraction that went silent before confirmation. By the time the sun reached its highest point, command had stopped marking their coordinates as active. The desert heat shimmered over the tents of Camp Harkin, and in that stillness, even hope felt like a form of denial. Inside the operations tent, a lieutenant sat replaying the same fragment of static. 3 seconds of broken syllables, one word clear enough to chill the room. Trapped. The colonel didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His order was the same one every pilot dreaded hearing. No one flies the Cut again. But someone had already decided otherwise. Across the tarmac, under the shade of a half-closed hangar, a gray A-10 sat in silence, its fuselage mottled with old battle scars, paint worn thin across the nose. The shark mouth was faded now, almost ghost-like, but the cannon beneath it gleamed as if waiting to speak again. Captain Rhea Morgan stood beside it, with her gloves tucked under one arm, watching the horizon through the open hangar door. She hadn't flown in 6 months, not since the mission that got her grounded for ignoring an abort order to save a pinned patrol. Officially, she was listed as under review. Unofficially, she was a name no one spoke inside the command tent unless the walls could be trusted. A mechanic walked past, carrying a clipboard. He didn't stop, didn't look at her, but as he passed, he murmured 2 words under his breath. Indigo 5. That was all she needed. Morgan didn't move quickly, but everything she did carried a quiet finality. She climbed the ladder, slid into the seat, and rested her hands on the controls like someone greeting an old friend they never expected to see again. The cockpit smelled of dust and metal, faintly of old oil and hydraulic fluid. She took a slow breath and began powering the systems. Switches clicked. Gauges flickered alive. The tower crackled over comms. Tempest 9, identify. You are not cleared for takeoff. Her hand didn't pause. Engines spooled. Tempest 9, confirm this is you. Captain, you're under suspension. She cut the channel.
On the far end of the runway, fuel trucks stopped mid-motion, ground crews staring as twin engines roared into a metallic howl that shook the hangars. A trail of sand lifted behind the aircraft as it rolled forward. The base siren never sounded. No one reached for the brake cart. They all knew better. In the command tent, radar lit up with an unregistered departure. Unauthorized launch, a technician shouted. The colonel stepped forward, his eyes narrowing as he read the call sign flashing faintly on the corner of the screen. Tempest 9. He exhaled once through his teeth and said quietly, "Let her go." Out over the desert, the Warthog climbed fast, wings cutting through the heat shimmer, the sound of its engines echoing down into the canyon miles ahead. Below those cliffs, the SEALs stirred at the vibration. One of them lifted his helmet, blood streaking the side of his helmet. "You hear that?" he whispered. The others went still, breath caught between disbelief and memory, because that sound didn't belong in this valley anymore. It belonged to the pilot who had once flown it and lived. And now she was coming back. Captain Rhea Morgan leveled at 2,000 feet, eyes fixed on the line of shadow where the canyon tore the desert in half. The horizon shimmered under heat so violent it made the mountains breathe. She'd flown this stretch before, the turbulence, the crosswinds, the dead air pockets, but never with fuel this thin or authority this non-existent. Inside the cockpit, the warnings blinked like nerves. Fuel 68%, hydraulics unstable, weapons green. That was all she needed, because when command runs out of courage, someone else has to fly. Back at Camp Harkin, comms turned to chaos. "Tempest 9's airborne! She's heading east!" someone shouted. The colonel didn't look up. "Keep her frequency clear. If she calls, you give her everything." Far below, Indigo 5 still breathed, if barely. 3 wounded, 1 critical. They'd run out of flares an hour ago. Water was rationed to sips. Sergeant Fail pressed his radio against a blood-smeared glove. "Base, this is Indigo 5. We're surrounded. Is anyone left up there?" Only static answered. He looked at the medic working a tourniquet that refused to hold. "Save the last rounds," he muttered. "We'll need them close." Then came the sound. Low at first, like the earth remembering thunder, then rising until stone vibrated under their knees. The men froze. Someone whispered, "No, she's not cleared." You don't ask permission to do what's already right. Rhea dropped altitude. The A-10 tilted into the canyon's mouth, air density shifting instantly from open desert to invisible fists. Proximity alarms wailed. She silenced them with one tap. The stick trembled under her grip, but her muscles remembered what trust felt like.
The walls closed fast. Sheer tanned cliffs streaked black with the burn marks of aircraft that had never come back. Each scar was a warning. She flew through them anyway. The canyon twisted left, then hard right. She matched its rhythm like a heartbeat she refused to forget. Thermal flare on the ridge, 3 hot signatures hiding in stone. She flipped the weapon selector. The HUD blinked, GAU-8 armed. She said, "Let's wake 'em up." And for the first time all day, the canyon remembered who owned the sky. The first burst tore the valley open. 7 barrels of depleted uranium spat fire through dust and steel. The sound hit seconds after, the long rolling growl of the Avenger cannon devouring distance. Rocks shattered, silhouettes vanished. Inside the command tent, radar tech stared. "She's engaging inside the cut." "How close to the floor?" "Too close, sir." Rhea banked hard, oxygen mask scraping her cheek. Fuel 54%. Right stabilizer heavy, still flying. Down below, Vale's radio cracked alive, broken but human. "Indigo 5, this is Tempest 9. If you can move, move now." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Vale's laugh broke through dust and disbelief. "Copy that, Tempest. We're moving." They started dragging the wounded, boots slipping in grit, adrenaline louder than pain. Above them, the A-10 roared again, its engine scraping the sky itself. It wasn't flying, it was defying. Rhea pushed throttle to full, altitude 180 feet. Metal screamed but held. Every vibration felt personal, every jolt a conversation between machine and pilot. She had sworn never to see these walls again. They said no one would ever fly the cut again. They were wrong. Behind her, the colonel's voice cut through the radio room. "Mark her grid. If she doesn't make it back, that's still our strike record." But she intended to make it back. She always did. The canyon widened ahead, light spilling in like redemption. Then radar lit red. A single blip rising fast from the south ridge. Incoming missile. Lock confirmed. Rhea didn't curse or flinch. She dropped lower, hugging the canyon floor so tight that dust ripped against her canopy. The missile followed her, homing on her heat trail. Alarms screamed again. She killed them. Her breathing steadied, heartbeat syncing with the engines. She'd made peace with what was coming. The canyon hadn't. And, as stone walls flashed by in streaks of copper and shadow, she whispered into the mic, "If you're going to hit me, you better be perfect." The missile struck the bend behind her, and the entire valley disappeared in fire. The explosion consumed the canyon in a single breath, rolling outward with the force of an earthquake and folding back in on itself until light, dust, and sound became one. Then everything fell still. No echoes, no wind, only a silence so heavy it felt alive.
On the canyon floor, Sergeant Vale pushed himself upright through the haze. His helmet was cracked, his hands bleeding, but the ringing in his ears dulled when he saw movement in the smoke. His team was still there, scattered, stunned, alive. And above the blinding glare, a dark outline trembled against the sky. The Warthog. It was climbing. Tempest 9, this is Indigo 5, he rasped into the damaged radio. We're still here. Only static answered, but the engines overhead grew louder, uneven yet determined, dragging the jet back toward daylight. Inside the cockpit, Captain Rhea Morgan blinked through the blood streaking her visor. Every system screamed red. Hydraulics gone. Right stabilizer fractured. One engine spiking heat. She ignored it all. Her fingers clung to the stick as if the aircraft could feel her will. Pain came in flashes, but focus stayed steady. She didn't look at the warning lights anymore. She listened to the rhythm of the engines, offbeat but alive. She laughed once, low and dry. Not today. Through the cracked canopy, she saw the valley below, smoke columns twisting, rocks still glowing from the blast. Somewhere down there, 6 men were moving, carrying the weight of the wounded. They had minutes at most. She would make those minutes count. Rhea eased the throttle and brought the hog around. The jet trembled but obeyed. The canyon spread beneath her like a wound that refused to close. From its far ridge came red tracer fire, thin, desperate lines trying to reach her. She rolled the aircraft, dropped altitude, and found the source. When orders fail, instinct becomes the only command that matters. She pressed the trigger. The GAU-8 thundered through the smoke, its roar echoing from wall to wall until the entire valley seemed to breathe again. Dust rose, tracer lines vanished, and the ambush ended in silence. Below, Vale turned toward the sound and felt the air shudder around him. "She's covering us," he shouted. The men grabbed stretchers and moved, stumbling through grit toward the extraction grid scratched on their map. The canyon that had buried them for hours now trembled with the rhythm of a machine refusing to die. Hope doesn't always speak in words. Sometimes it sounds like metal, still fighting gravity. Back at Camp Harkin, the radar flickered back to life. "Tempest 9 reacquired," a technician yelled. The colonel's voice stayed calm. "Keep her line open. If she talks, you listen." Rhea tried to talk. The comm channel hissed with static, circuits fried from the missile's burst. She was alone, but she didn't need permission to finish what she'd started. Fuel sat at 37%, one engine bleeding power, yet the hog still held together. She trimmed manually, feeling the metal vibrate like a pulse beneath her palms.
Far below, the SEALs reached open ground, a flat stretch barely wide enough for a helicopter. They waved smoke markers into the wind, hoping someone still watched. Rhea saw the flare ignite through the haze and rolled toward it. Her flight path aligned perfectly with the ridge still hiding enemy movement. She tightened the harness and pushed the throttle forward. Every pilot has a ceiling. Today, hers didn't exist. The damaged stabilizer groaned, the cockpit shook, but she held course, dragging the jet lower and faster until the cliffs blurred into streaks of copper. One more run, one more sweep, and they'd make it out. Back at the base, a lieutenant murmured, "She'll never land that aircraft." The colonel didn't glance up. "She's not trying to land it. She's trying to end the fight. Rhea's vision swam, but the canyon stayed clear in her mind, every turn memorized, every downdraft mapped by instinct. She locked her sights, took one breath, and let the hog dive through the smoke. The cannon roared once more, erasing the last gun positions between the seals and the open desert. The aircraft climbed again, engine coughing, wings trembling but still whole. For a heartbeat, the canyon exhaled, quiet, almost at peace. Then a new signal lit the radar, faster, colder, not a missile, something bigger. Rhea stared at the screen as the blip split into two. Whatever was coming, it was airborne. The blip multiplied. 2 contacts, fast, descending from the east. For a second, Rhea thought the radar had glitched again, but the lock tone confirmed otherwise. Heat signatures moving at combat speed, not missiles, aircraft. She narrowed her eyes, so they brought friends. The A-10's threat receiver screamed as 2 enemy strike jets dove into the canyon's mouth. Their speed advantage was obvious, their maneuverability suicidal in terrain like this. They weren't here to duel. They were here to make sure the canyon finished what the missile hadn't. Rhea checked her ammo feed. 180 rounds left, enough for 1 pass. Fuel, 28%. Right stabilizer still bleeding drag. On the floor below, Indigo 5 pushed toward the extraction zone, the air vibrating under the thunder above. One of the SEALs stumbled under the weight of a wounded man, sand slipping beneath his boots. "We're out of time," Vale shouted, but his voice barely carried over the roar that tore across the canyon. The enemy jet screamed overhead, shockwaves scattering dust into spirals. The SEALs ducked, instinctively covering their heads. For a moment, no one fired. Even death seemed to pause, waiting to see which direction vengeance would fall from. Inside the A-10, Rhea felt the airframe flex as the sonic pressure hit. Her left wing rattled violently. She rolled level, scanning the cliffs for a shadow. There, one jet banking low, hugging the ridge. Some pilots chase glory. She chased ghosts. She turned into the path of the first attacker, throttle forward, altitude dropping to barely 100 feet. The Warthog wasn't built for speed. It was built to survive. That was the difference. The enemy jet overshot the turn, its nose cutting too wide. In that instant, Rhea pulled the trigger. The cannon's roar split the canyon open. The burst ripped through air and metal alike. The enemy fighter disintegrated in a bloom of sparks and debris, scattering across the rocks like falling stars. "Tempest 9, good hit!" A voice crackled faintly through her half-dead comms, but she couldn't tell if it was real or just her memory filling the void. The second aircraft came from behind, locking fast. The radar tone screamed, lights flashing red across the dash. Rhea's instincts took over. She dropped altitude again, flying so low the dust trail reached her wingtips. A burst of gunfire tore across her canopy, but missed by meters. She didn't flinch. Her right engine sputtered once, coughing black smoke. She coaxed it forward. The A-10 was limping now, but it could still bite. She banked sharply, drawing the pursuer deeper into the canyon. The closer you fly to the ground, the harder it is for heaven to tell the difference between courage and madness. Down below, Vale's team reached the extraction point, a narrow plateau surrounded by stone walls and open sky above. The medic raised a flare, its orange glow cutting through the smoke. They were exposed, but it was the only signal they could send. 2 helicopters were inbound, their rotors a distant thrum over the horizon. Rhea spotted the flare through the dust, its glow trembling like a heartbeat. She smiled faintly. "There you are." Then the radar lock returned, this time from above. The second jet climbed and rolled into a steep dive, missiles armed. She saw the glint of metal streaks slicing the sky and yanked the stick hard left.
The A-10 lurched, hydraulics groaning, a trail of dust exploding behind her. The first missile missed, detonating against the canyon wall. The second didn't. It clipped her left wing, tearing through the armor and sending a shock wave through her entire body. She gasped, fighting for control. The stick trembled. The jet tilted into a spin. She cut throttle, balanced rudder, forced the A-10 level again. Sweat and blood blurred together across her face. She spat copper onto her collar and forced air into her lungs. "Not yet," she whispered. Back at the base, the colonel's knuckles whitened over the comm table. He said, "Tell Rotary they've got one shot to get those men out, and tell them she's still in the air buying it."
Over the canyon, the sound of rotors began to rise, distant, faint, but real. The first helicopter appeared through the haze, dipping low into the storm of dust. The SEALs waved frantically, dragging the wounded toward the clearing. Vale looked up, eyes wide. "She's still fighting!" he shouted, though no one could hear him over the roar. Sometimes, the strongest signal in war isn't a radio. It's the sound of someone refusing to give up. Rhea saw the choppers entering the canyon, their blades carving chaos from the heat. Her radar still blinked, enemy jet turning for another run. She was out of tricks, out of flares, out of time, but she wasn't out of choices. She rolled the A-10 over the ridgeline, diving head-on toward the approaching aircraft. Both jets roared toward each other through dust and sunlight. For a brief moment, two pilots saw each other, one chasing orders, the other defying them. The enemy fired first. Rhea pulled every ounce of power left, drawing the hog upward just as the missile streaked beneath her. The explosion ripped the air apart. Shrapnel slammed against her undercarriage, puncturing the fuselage. The Warthog shuddered, but didn't fall. Below, the helicopters reached the plateau. The SEALs piled inside, adrenaline replacing exhaustion. Vale was the last to board. He turned one final time, watching the sky above the canyon shimmer with fire and smoke. "She did it," he murmured. "She actually did it!" And somewhere above that canyon, the sound that once meant death now meant deliverance. As the helicopters lifted off, the A-10 limped through the haze, smoke trailing across the horizon. Inside the cockpit, Rhea exhaled once, the kind of breath that knows the hardest part isn't surviving, it's stopping. Her instruments flickered again, radar shifting to static. But through the interference, one faint signal pulsed, friendly IFF, inbound from the north. She smiled weakly. "Took you long enough," she said, unaware the contact was moving far too fast to be friendly. At first, the signal looked harmless, just another green pulse fighting through static. But when Rhea switched to thermal overlay, her heart sunk. The signature was cold and narrow, running high over the canyon rim. Not friendly. A drone or a fighter, maybe both. Whoever was out there wasn't coming to rescue anyone. They were coming to erase evidence. She wiped the blood from her brow and steadied her breathing. One engine was half dead, the other gasping. Fuel 22%, ammunition 42 rounds, hydraulic pressure dropping by the minute. The Warthog should have been a falling rock by now, but it kept breathing because she refused to let it die. Some machines are held together by bolts and steel. Others are held together by the will of whoever still needs them.
Down below, the two helicopters banked west toward the open desert, rotors slicing the dust. Vale watched the burning ridges disappear behind them. "Where's she now?" the crew chief asked. Vale didn't answer. He just stared out the open ramp, searching the horizon for the gray speck that had saved them. Rhea climbed through the haze, sensors blind, radar half-functional. The northern contact was closing fast, Mach .9 at least. She flipped the master arm switch and saw the weapon indicator blink low ammo. She could still make one burst count. "Come on," she whispered to the hog. "One more dance." The sky above the canyon stretched open, brilliant and merciless. The unknown contact broke through the cloud layer, sleek, dark, and modern. A next-generation interceptor, the kind the Air Force didn't even admit existed. Its presence here meant one thing. Someone wanted her gone quietly. The fighter fired first. 2 missiles streaked toward her, white trails twisting like spears of light. Rhea pulled hard, banking left into the canyon she'd just climbed out of. The A-10 groaned but followed. Dust exploded against her wings as she skimmed the ridge by meters. The missiles adjusted course, hunting heat. She cut throttle, dropped altitude, and released a manual flare, one of the last 2 still functional. The decoy flared bright, drawing the first missile off course. The second kept coming. She rolled again, hugging the canyon wall so tight her wingtip shaved stone. The missile overshot, detonating behind her and turning half the valley to smoke. The shockwave slapped her cockpit, cracking the canopy further, but she was still flying. Back at Camp Harkon, the operations tent erupted. "Unidentified aircraft engaging Tempest 9. Is it hostile? If it isn't, it's the angriest friend we've ever had." The colonel leaned over the map. "Patch anything we've got left to her channel. She's not coming back blind." Rhea heard fragments through the broken radio, half words, half ghosts. She didn't need them. The radar tone chirped again. The enemy jet was looping for another run. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's flying straight into it and daring it to miss. She leveled, waiting for visual contact. The jet flashed across her canopy, overshot the turn, and came around wide. She saw the perfect angle, a sliver of shadow between 2 ridges, narrow enough to hide her heat signature. She dove into it, killed her engines for 3 heartbeats, gliding silent through the smoke. The enemy radar lost her. When she reignited the turbines, the hog leapt forward like a beast reborn. "Let's finish this," she said, voice steady. She pulled up behind the enemy fighter, the reticle struggling to keep lock through flickering sensors. The gun feed jammed once, then freed itself with a metallic cough. Rhea squeezed the trigger. The last of the GAU-8's rounds tore through the air, a solid stream of fire carving into the jet's fuselage. The explosion was brief but absolute, an orange blossom folding into dust.
Sometimes survival isn't about outrunning death. It's about convincing it you've already made peace. The remains of the interceptor spiraled into the cliffs, leaving only drifting smoke and the faint echo of its impact. Rhea leaned back against the seat, exhaustion flooding every muscle. Her cockpit smelled of metal and ozone, her visor streaked with blood and sand. The adrenaline faded, leaving only the silence of altitude and the slow pulse of warning lights still begging for attention. Fuel 12%, both generators flickering. The hog wanted to rest. She switched to open frequency, hoping the static might carry words this time. "Command, Tempest 9, package secure, team extracted, target neutralized." Her voice cracked but held. "Request vector home." The reply came broken, scattered, barely audible through layers of interference. "Tempest, copy. You are priority, runway." Then it faded again. She smiled despite the noise. At least someone still heard her. She turned west, toward the setting sun, tracing the distant dust trails of the retreating helicopters. The desert stretched endless beneath her.
gold bleeding into shadow. Every war ends in silence. What matters is who's still flying when the silence comes. Rhea set course for base, her body trembling with fatigue, her aircraft stitched together by nothing but defiance. Behind her, the canyon still burned, its echoes fading into the wind. The mission was done, but the sky above her remained full of ghosts. For the first time in hours, she let herself exhale fully. The hog responded with a low, steady hum, as if both pilot and machine understood the same truth. Neither had been built to quit. As she crossed the ridgeline, the radio crackled again, this time a new voice, calm and precise. "Tempest 9, hold heading. You're being diverted." She frowned. "By whose order?" The answer came cold. "Ours." The runway lights appeared like a mirage through the smoke. She barely felt the landing gear lock. She was running on muscle memory and instinct alone. The A-10 hit hard, bounced once, then slammed down again, tire screaming as sparks danced beneath the wings. The right strut collapsed, metal scraping against concrete, but the hog refused to roll. It ground to a brutal stop in a cloud of dust and silence. The canopy hissed open. For a moment she just sat there, hands trembling against the controls, the smell of burned hydraulic fluid thick in her lungs. The world felt too quiet. When she finally climbed down, her boots hit the tarmac with a weight she hadn't carried before. Mechanics started toward her, then hesitated. No one knew what to say to someone who'd already written their own obituary. Two unmarked vehicles rolled across the field. Men in plain uniforms stepped out. No insignia, no name tags, no rank. One of them spoke without emotion. "Captain Rhea Morgan, you're to come with us." She met his stare, voice calm. "Am I under arrest?" "Not exactly," he said. "Debriefing, higher clearance." They drove her past the admin block and through a gate she had never seen open before. The facility beyond was small, concrete, windowless. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed over a single table and two chairs. On the table lay a folder, thin, unmarked, except for one photograph tucked beneath the cover. A grainy image of her jet mid-dive, engines blazing. The man across from her didn't introduce himself. "You violated a no-fly directive. You engaged hostile assets without command authorization, and you saved 6 lives that were already written off." He closed the file slowly. "Do you feel responsible?" Rhea leaned back, her voice steady. "If I wasn't, they'd be dead." He studied her for a long time, then slid another folder across the table. Inside was a black patch, stitched letters in dull gray thread. "Storm glass." He said, "You're being reassigned. Off record, indefinite. The aircraft will be refitted under the same designation. If you agree, you'll report to coordinates you'll receive in 48 hours. Rhea turned the patch over in her hands. The fabric was coarse, the word unfamiliar, but something in her gut recognized it. "And if I don't?" The man's faint smile didn't reach his eyes. "Then we both pretend you never landed." She stood, pocketed the patch, and walked out without another word. Outside, dawn was breaking, pale light spilling across the scorched horizon. The A-10 still sat on the runway, silent and battered, its skin streaked with dust and ash. She rested her hand against the fuselage, feeling the warmth still trapped in the metal. "Rest easy. We're not done yet." Heroes aren't built in sunlight. They're forged where the silence hits hardest, and some never stop flying. The camera would linger on her silhouette walking into the light, the hangar doors closing behind her. the black patch folded in her hand. Somewhere beyond the base, the sound of turbines began to rise again, and above the desert, the storm was waiting.